Hey y'all, welcome to the Big Mama Was Wrong podcast. I'm your host Marisha, and here we dive into wellness and growth surrounding mental health and culture. Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Big Mama Was Wrong. Today we have a guest with us, and actually this is my classmate from high school. So Wallace Roselle High School, Miss Laneshia. She's going to introduce herself and tell what she does, and then we'll get started.
Afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is when you hear this. This is Laneshia. I am a district math coach. I support math teachers in the Cumberland County District. So this is my second career. And my first career was all about developing people. And so education kind of fell in my lap. So here I am developing students now, went from developing adults to now developing students. And I absolutely love what I do. Can't say that it does not go without days where I am completely stressed out, but ultimately I absolutely love what I do. So I'm excited to be here talking with you today, and let's get into some good conversation so parents can kind of take away some things, and maybe even teachers who may be listening can take away some things as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming. So one of the things that I didn't know, I know I saw a lot about you posting doing like math, teaching students math, and math is very for me, it was not my strong suit, like ever. I could pass and I could make even B's and stuff, but it just was never a strong suit for me. So I always consider it to be a challenging subject. Do you feel like that's still the same now where a lot of people are intimidated by math, or has times changed? Because we haven't been in school for a long time.
I think that it's probably worse.
Okay.
The reason why I say that is because from all kinds of media outlets are pushing the narrative that math is the subject that everybody struggles with. So
Mhm.
from movies to jokes online, if you even Google math memes right now, I'm willing to bet you that 99% of them are negative. So I think
Mhm.
it's probably even worse now because it is pushed out there that it's okay to not be good at math. And I'm using quotations when I say good at math because I don't think that there's really a such thing. Like I think that we all are born with our strengths, obviously.
Mhm.
But I think that everybody can grow to be good at math. The thing is though, it takes some fine tuning, it takes some tweaking, it takes a lot of practice. So when your mindset is negative, that can kind
Mhm.
of stand in the way of the things that you're able to accomplish.
It makes sense. Okay. So basically you were saying like you're a coach. Can you explain what that looks like as it relates to
Yes.
like students, parents, and how you fall in between?
Yes. So prior to me coming into this role, I was a classroom teacher. I started out teaching in Dupin County, and I went into the classroom as a emergency teacher. So for people that don't know what that means for a person that's coming in who does not have any of the coursework to be the teacher of that particular subject. So my background is
Okay.
in finance and accounting. So
Mhm.
although it is some math in there, it's not the math necessarily that they want you to have to teach the courses. So I was a emergency teacher, permit to teach type of license. So I had to hustle and teach myself and learn what I needed to learn so that I can pass the test. Thank God I passed it on the first time. And then I taught, and then I took a leadership role from the very beginning because again, this was my second career. So I already had some experience developing people, and teaching
Mhm.
is pretty similar to what I was doing before. So anyway, people always said, I can see you as a coach. Like I can see you doing that. And I did not know what that meant or what that looked like. I was just like,
Mhm.
okay. And I think I pretty much just followed, I just let God kind of lead my way, I guess you can say. So I followed whatever I was feeling, wherever my motivations, my inspirations led me day by day. That's just what I did. And so I am here now a coach. So what that means is as a district coach, I support multiple schools. So I am in one school 3 days a week. I'm in another school 2 days a week. And what that looks like is I may have coaching cycles, which means I work with the teacher, identify a need, a goal that we want to work towards. And then I am constantly kind of going in that classroom to support the teacher as well as the students. So I use a lot of data to support what I'm doing with the teacher and the students. And obviously, my goal is to show some success, to show some progress in both of those areas. So for example, today I was at one of my schools and I spent all day long in eighth grade classrooms. And what they've decided to do is kind of collapse their classrooms. So they got all of the eighth grade students pretty much in one classroom for several different periods of the day.
Mhm.
So you have both of your teachers in there, and then I'm in there as well. So the reason why we're doing it, and we're going to probably get to this a little bit deeper later in the episode, is because of behavior challenges, because of the gaps that students have, because some of our teachers are really, really new. And so it just helps to have us all in the classroom together versus us being separate and kind of figuring things out and encountering all of these challenges that maybe we could avoid if we did something like this. So anyway, at the school today, in the classroom with the students and the teachers, and let me just tell you, like it is when I tell you that every day is just is it's just every day ain't no day where I'm like, girl, I love what I do. Some
Yeah,
days are
yeah.
just really, really hard
Mhm.
because the kids, middle school is just a hard age. Kids are
Mhm.
figuring themselves out, they're learning themselves, they are smelling themselves, as my grandmother used to say. So you're
Mhm.
having to deal with a lot of that stuff. So as I'm in there supporting the teachers and supporting the students, there's a lot of other things that I kind of have to do as well that might not necessarily be on my job description. But
Mhm.
essentially, I support teachers, I support students because at the end of the day, I want our kids to be successful. So
Mhm.
you may have seen me, maybe some of your listeners may have seen me on TikTok. Not only do I care about my child that lives in my house or the students that I work with in my schools, but I care about all kids all over because of what I said earlier. So many people feel like they are terrible at math. So I make videos to kind of help support them. And teachers will watch them, parents will watch them. Everybody's pretty much watching them because I try to make them kind of easy to understand. I try to make them think about it in a different way. I'm really big on conceptual understanding. So in my role as a coach, I do a lot of research where it pertains to the standards to make sure that what the kids supposed to learn, I can figure out all the ways to get them there. So that was a lot for me to just explain to you what I do. But yeah, in a nutshell, I support the teachers and help them to support the students.
Yeah. So I love that. One, it was a few things you pointed out. One was the fact that you were led by your passions. So I believe everyone is born. I think your passions can change over time, your interests can change over time, but I think your gifts and just things that you just love by nature, I think that's like God inherited. I think He just gives us that, and it just looks differently as your life changes and your perspective changes. So the fact that you literally just followed what was in your heart, I love that. The other thing is the fact that it sounds like it's a proactive learning experience. So instead of just waiting for the problem, you're trying to correct the problem before it shows itself and everybody's learning together. Teachers are learning, the students are learning, and I love that because a lot of times when things are reactive, it's a lot more to clean up in the long run. And whenever you have other people's children and other people's children's lives in a mix of that, including your own and other people's livelihoods, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So one of the things I used to work in a juvenile detention facility, and one of the things that I noticed were a lot of kids were behind.
Mm-hmm.
Behind meaning you might have had an adolescent that their math or their reading levels may have been at elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever you think about the fact that they have to become an adult and they have to become independent and they have to be able to at least try to thrive, that's disturbing. It's concerning
Mm-hmm.
because it makes you wonder how they're gonna figure out what needs to be done. And all of them always had the same argument. I know how to count money. And I'm sure that they did, but it's just so many other things that you may not know that you need until you get there, and then you're left as an adult trying to figure out stuff that if you would have had situations like where you are now, or the teachers that you work with, trying to figure out what needs to be done ahead of time, I think a lot of stuff will be avoided. And it's no slight to teachers because I believe a lot of teachers are doing the best that they can, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just in certain systems, it's a great need for the type of work that you're doing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, let me just say, I'm glad that it feels or sounds proactive because on a daily basis, it does not feel that way. Because a lot of times, there's so much paperwork in education. There's so much paperwork and so many things administratively that you have to get done as a teacher
Hmm.
that sometimes feels overwhelming to classroom teachers for you to get done everything in the day that you need to get done. And I made a post about this recently that the needs that our kids have, sometimes you feel like, wow, like I am not making an impact because everything that this child needs, I cannot provide them in the time period, the small time period that I have with them. For example, I asked an eighth grade student the other week, what is 4 minus 4? and the student started drawing circles to answer this question. Now, some people online were like, well, I mean, if it's circles, you can look at it as like it was zero, so she was still right. Well, okay, yes, in elementary
Mhm.
school, yes, we do use counters to
Mhm.
represent, the number of items. However, in the 8th grade, should we really have to draw circles to figure out what 4 minus 4 is? No. And so when you're mentioning your experience working in the juvenile center, detention center, and then how behind people were, that was one of the reasons why I went from high school to middle school. Because I said, okay, I'm in this high school classroom, and these kids are 2 and 3 grade levels behind. I'm teaching them grade level content. I have a semester with them. It feels impossible. And you say, okay, I'm not going to let this beat me down. But the reality is, if you're somebody who is driven and you want what you do to be impactful, you want your students to be successful, it's going to weigh on you. So I said, well, maybe I need to take a step back. Let me go to middle school and see if I can be more impactful. And so then when I went to middle school, the same thing. I'm seeing the same thing. And then we got hit with COVID, which made it
Mhm.
even worse, a bad situation even worse. Because I don't want people to feel like COVID is what made it bad. No, it was bad before COVID. So now you have the students who are coming into middle school classrooms who again have to draw circles to understand what 4 minus 4 is. And even though that person told you I can count money, I'm willing to bet you that if they went into a store and had to calculate their change without the use of a calculator or a cash register, they would stumble.
That's true. I feel like what you're saying, counting circles, is kind of what we equated back in the day, like counting on your fingers. So if you're asking, that's pretty much the same thing. I understand what people are saying about finding a positive side to it, but also it is a level of understanding that you would hope that a child has in middle school whenever they're not having to do that type of stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a long time ago, when I remember we were in high school, we used to always say, "Oh, we'll use the calculator," and now kids have calculators on their phones and stuff like that. But it still is, I guess, fundamentally some skills
Yeah.
that you want to make sure that your child has. So I understand that. So with kids that have like IEPs, which can you very briefly explain what an IEP is before
So
we like just start
IEP,
throwing out acronyms?
yes, IEP. And I'm glad that you said that because I hate when people start throwing out acronyms and then don't say what they are and expect people to know what they are.
Mhm.
But an IEP, for those who may not have experience with it, is an individualized education plan. So a student may have a diagnosed learning disability that affords them specific accommodations. So, or like different supports and interventions that they need to have because of the learning disability.
So with students, children that have IEPs, do you find that the IEPs are instrumental in helping them catch up to where they're supposed to be? Okay. If it's something we need to skip, it's okay. I'm okay with skipping. But
So
just
I'll say this. I will say
okay.
this. I think that one thing that I believe in is whenever I was coming up, I feel like there were people who were scared to be labeled. They did not want to be labeled. I remember adults not saying they didn't want their children to be labeled and things like that. Like when I became an adult, I heard conversations about that. What I am going to say is if you have a child in elementary school and you notice something is not right, if a teacher has brought up something to your attention that they feel is not right, something that requires some attention, please do not be afraid of a label because the resources like the interventions, all those extra bodies, I feel like are more prevalent in elementary school than they are the further that you move up. So when you get to middle school and nobody has done anything to add that extra layer of support for you, it gets harder and harder. I remember taking my education courses and learning about learning differences and things like that. There was a time in history where there were only a few students who had learning disabilities. Whereas now when you go into classrooms, I feel like we have swapped it. So there's
Yeah.
only a few students who are on grade level. So when you think about that, if I have majority of my class that needs intensive support, I'm only one person. I'm only one person. So if I had one or two in my class, okay, I can make some changes here. I can make some things work. We can have a lady push in, and I'm talking from a middle school standpoint. We can have a lady push in. She can work with these two students. We can really kind of, just make some things happen. But when you're talking about 14, 15, 20 kids who have these needs, whether documented or not,
Mhm.
it's you start to teeter on that almost impossible line. So I say all that to say that if you feel like your child needs extra support, or there is a learning disability that may not have been diagnosed, or whatever the case may be, do not be afraid of a title. Focus on getting your baby what they need, because when they get to
Yeah.
middle school and then high school, the layers of support are not as prevalent
Mhm.
from what I've seen. It's just harder.
A lot of people do avoid labels. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want the diagnoses. And then a lot of times people associate diagnoses with medication. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of people, a lot of students too, that they don't want to take basically what they say stuff for like ADHD. That's what they associate IEP with, is ADHD medication. And so I'm glad that you pointed out just with the basis, if you feel like it's something that needs to be investigated, if you feel like you need some additional support, getting it while the support is more abundant instead of
Right.
until things progress. And then even like the patterns that I've seen, sometimes it's children that start out that needed the support in elementary school, and by the time they turn 15 or 16, they may be looking towards dropping out, or they may be the kids that I've encountered where, they end up in juvenile justice or other systems because they didn't have what they needed when they were in like younger grades. So
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, you about to say something?
No, I
I'll
was saying
cut you.
absolutely. I was agreeing with you because you hit it.
So with whenever you were a teacher and even now being a coach, what were some of the emotional or behavioral challenges, or how did you handle them whenever you were in that role, or even now, now that you're in a different role?
So some of the one thing I really want to make clear is that if you are a student, I just want people who are listening to think for a moment that if you are in a classroom where everybody seems like they're further along than you, imagine how that could feel like mentally. Like
Mhm.
imagine how motivated you're going to be to come to class, or to participate into the conversation, or to try to attempt any of the assignments. When you feel like you are behind, when people understand and you don't understand, that plays a toll on you. And I see that every single day, and a lot of times the way it shows up is through behaviors. So a student is acting out or trying to draw attention to themselves in a way that does not show that they don't understand what's going on.
Right.
So I might act out, I might be disruptive, I might be talkative, I might want to talk about some things that are totally off subject, because I don't want to have to answer any of these questions that's related to this math, because I don't know what's going on. And I was just having a conversation earlier today that a lot of times when you go into classrooms and you see students with their heads down, it's not necessarily out of defiance. I mean, sometimes it may be. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's because, like, I am tired because I do not understand what's going on. You're going too fast, even though you feel like you're going at the right pace.
Mhm.
And I have too many gaps to even begin to participate in this conversation.
Yeah.
That's what we see on a daily basis. So, how do we deal with those things when you're in a classroom like I was in today, where we have several adults in there because we've collapsed it? I
Mhm.
think it makes it a little bit more accessible, or a little easier for
Mhm.
us to go to those students who need that additional support. However, if you're a teacher in the classroom by yourself with 25, 30 students in there, the chances of you being able to really serve each of those 30 students in the way that they need to be served is really slim. So then you might see an uptick in those behavior issues.
Mhm.
And obviously, you don't want to suspend kids because they're acting out, because now this is more stuff that they're going to miss out on. And now you're going to be even more behind. So it's like you really got to find a balance. And I think it takes having the support of parents, having the support of colleagues, administration, to really keep students on a positive pathway, because it's
Mhm.
it's really easy for it to go left.
Yeah, that was one of the things I remember when I first started working with adolescents. So if a child didn't understand what was going on in school, they would skip school and then you would be suspended for skipping school. So it's like you're missing time on top of time. That was one of the things that I noticed. And then another thing was like when you ask somebody to read out loud, disastrous. Like just told it could be the sweetest kid and that attitude just come or what seems to be an attitude just comes out of nowhere. So being able to identify like, okay, this is why we're seeing what we're seeing versus just go to the office and get them out the classroom because I got 29 other students that I have to deal with. I really do applaud and appreciate that type of mentality and that approach towards it, because I think it does make a difference. Where you
Absolutely.
may not be able to, if it is a switch, if you got 30 kids and 20 of them need attention, you may not be able to get all 20 where they need to be. Making the approach to get as many as you can, I feel like
Mhm.
it contributes overall to society, because they're going to become members of more, or I would say more independent members of society at some point. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like doing your part while you can.
Yeah.
So.
I wish there was more that can be done. I was literally having this conversation earlier today where I was feeling like, we spend what you see is when you look at schools, it's not just one classroom or one grade level that needs support. It's all of them, because all of the kids are acting out in some way or another, right? So whether it is because they're behind or because of the things that are going on at home, they hungry, mama got locked up, like whatever it is, they
Mhm.
going through something, and it's everywhere, especially the school that I was at today. It is everywhere across all grade levels. And when you feel like, oh, well, I had a good day because this class got X, Y, and Z, and it seemed like we're moving forward. But then I'm thinking about the other classes that I wasn't in and the other students who I wasn't able to support because I wasn't in that classroom. So again, when we're talking about like that, the ratio of the teacher to the students, especially the students who need that intensive support, it really makes you sad because it's
Mhm.
just so much that needs to be done and just not enough bodies and time in the day to get it done.
I definitely understand that. And even with you bringing up the other factors, I remember reading statistics during the pandemic where were saying that a lot of kids, the only meals that they get, or I'll say a high number of kids, the only meals that they get are meals at school. Or the abuse rate went up because a lot of times the abusers were in the home with the children. So being that the schools were closed, they were more accessible to abusers. So you have all these different factors about how the school is supportive, but when you were saying like, okay, you weren't able to get to this classroom or you weren't able to get to those students, I feel like duplication, like representation for one, and duplication, I feel like those are really important. Because if
Mhm.
if you were to rate yourself on a 1 out of 10 and you say, okay, I may not be a 10, but I'm an 8, and then you can take that and duplicate 3 or 4 more eights, then you don't have to literally be in that classroom with those students, but you can, I would say, maybe rest easier knowing that as a collective you're able to make more progress with the students. So
Oh yes, that
my
was
point of encouragement is like just to continue to do that and put out there what it is that you hope other people grab, so that it, I guess, like, catch a fire and just make as much impact as you can without burning yourself out. And that's just a mental health therapist talking without burning yourself out. But in all seriousness, it's just being able to do what you can by not just being that one person, but helping other people understand, okay, well, once you consider this in your classroom, and you'll see more of a difference across the board. So.
absolutely. We all about building capacity just across the schools, the county. Yes, but honey, I'm gonna still tell you it's a challenge. But I'm gonna take exactly what you said. We're gonna do what we can do, and then the rest we're gonna save it for another day. We just gonna take away at it one bite at a time. Thank you.
Definitely. One of the things that you mentioned a couple of times was like the different resources that, or what we would say is natural supports that students have, whether it's teachers, parents, or other people that are supportive. Can you provide like a best case, worst case scenario if a teacher has to contact a parent? So like, what's the optimal way that a parent will respond to a teacher calling home and saying their grades is not where they need to be, the grades are not where they need to be, or the behavior is less than desirable for more than a few days a week? What's the best case or the best result that you would like to get from the conversation?
So when teachers are calling home to get support from parents, one, the best case scenario really is not having to call home, to have a parent who is already involved and already
Mhm.
reaching out to the teacher saying, hey, I noticed X, Y, and Z. Can you provide a little bit more information? What can I do from home to support him or her or them or they in reaching the goals? That's the base case
Mhm.
scenario, is them just
Okay.
kind of playing an active role. But if I have to call home, I think it's being responsive, a parent that not is going to listen and not necessarily jump to take the side of their kids. I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of times, and sometimes I can be like that myself because when you're a mama, you just you gonna take the sides of your baby sometimes, but just try to be open minded because
Mhm.
sometimes your children at school are not the children that they are at home, so you want to be open minded, right? So yeah, so a parent who is reflective and is willing to have the conversation and game plan about what we can do to move this child forward, and a parent who already has supports in place.
Mhm.
So maybe there are some structures at home or some things at home that they can kind of leverage to help kind of change the behaviors or help us see some more of the positive behaviors. I think that's the best case scenario. On the
Mhm.
flip side of that, I've had parents ask me, tell me what to do, or what can I do? Give me
Okay.
some feedback. And I'm like, but that's your child. And you raise them. So that's a real hard question or a hard situation for you to provide feedback on, to tell somebody how to raise their child. You can
Mhm.
give them you can give them suggestions like, hey, let's set up an accountability timeline. Like, let's check in every few days or whatever. But I think ultimately, as a parent, you kind of should already know what your expectations are for your kids. So
Okay.
I think that's the flip side of it. Now, I have had parents, I call them and they roll up to the school
Okay.
in in the bonnet, in like they come up there and they're like, you are not going to embarrass me, and you know what my expectations are for you, and I expect you to live up to them. I've seen that as well. I don't necessarily I don't know necessarily how I feel about it one way or the other, because sometimes that could cause kids to shut down even more, because now they feel like they were embarrassed because
Mhm.
you came into the school and maybe you called them out or whatever. So I don't know how I feel about that, but the fact that they are willing to show up for their child says a lot, because then you have people who won't answer the phone calls, block the school's phone number, won't return emails, only respond to you when it has something to do with athletics, just these different scenarios that's not really positive and doesn't really set a good example, and makes it very difficult for us as teachers to have a leg to stand on when we're talking with kids. So for me, the way that I guess manage my classroom or work with my students, I taught from the vantage point, or I guess the position of mom. So they're not my kids, but I treated them like they were my kids. So I could
Mhm.
kind of, we'll be in classroom, I can kind of give them a look and they can kind of get
Mhm.
it together. Every teacher does not have the ability to do that. So, in the absence of having a parent at home who's going to hold you accountable, it helps to have somebody in the classroom who you look up to or who you respect, because then disappointing them is going to make you feel bad and is going to motivate you to do something differently.
I actually thought you were going to say worst case scenario, especially when you mentioned like pulling up to the school was like, why did you give my child a F? Or why did you give my child a D? I like a lack of accountability for that's what I thought you were going to say was the worst case scenario.
I haven't ever experienced it personally. Not them. I mean, you have parents asking you questions about the grades, but personally, I can only speak from myself. I try to keep my stuff airtight. So
Mhm.
I'm very organized, like, from checking my emails, from grading papers to providing feedback. Like, I am very organized. So you really can't come to me and demand anything, because my stuff is so put together. You like, well, what can I say? What can I say? You can't say nothing, mom, dad, because it's together. Everything is laid out. But in the instances where teachers are not, like, that's not their strong suit, it
Mhm.
opens the door for parents to come up there and be disrespectful because they
Mhm.
feel like they have a leg to stand on. Because the moment, if you're dealing with that type of parent, all it takes is one mess up, and they're going to milk that one mess up. They're going to milk it for as much as they can, for everything they got. So I try to stay, I'm not perfect by any means, but I try to stay on my stuff as much as possible. I try to communicate proactively versus reactively. So
Mhm.
by reaching out to parents at the beginning of the year saying, hey, just want to let you know I am Miss Boone. I'm going to be your child's math teacher. Excited to work with them. Hey, Anisha did really good in class today. So not just calling them about negative stuff. So then you already know, like, I'm rooting for him. I'm
Mhm.
rooting for him. So then there's no way for you to come up here and say, why my child get an F? Probably because they didn't do something. Because you
Mhm.
know that I'm rooting for them. Does that make sense?
It does. I feel like it's fostering a relationship from the beginning. Yeah, I love that. Okay. So one of the things we were talking about briefly was about some of the challenges we could say that kids have at home, or I think sometimes at school too, because bullying is really big among like younger generations and stuff like that. Do you feel like it's important for teachers and school staff to be safe spaces, or do you kind of feel like, well, my question is, sometimes we say we have scopes, right? So one teacher may feel like my scope is to teach the students. I don't have anything to do with what's happening at home, what happened in the cafeteria. This is my scope. Or do you feel like it's important for teachers to, have some flexibility to some degree to be a safe space for students?
Yes, I absolutely believe that we have to create safe spaces in our classrooms. I also see a teacher who might say, I just want to teach. I can see
Okay.
that. I can see that thought process as well, because I was thinking about this on the way home last week, just how much a teacher has to do. Like, they have to teach their material, they have to plan for it, they have to grade, they have to provide feedback, they have to call home, they have to document behaviors, they have to document for IEPs, they have to do small groups, they have to be counselors, they have to be, moms. Like, there's so many hats that
Mhm.
classroom teachers wear that I am sure that it can be draining for somebody whose personality does not naturally, like, they don't naturally operate well in that space. So I get it. But you have to be a safe space, especially, I think, obviously I'm thinking about math. If a child comes into my classroom and does not feel like they are a math person, they're not going to be open to have math conversations. So by
Mhm.
creating community in my classroom, creating a safe space, now they're willing to take the risk of having the conversation, because the person that's talking is the person that's doing the learning. So if I can't get them to open up, it's going to be hard for me to figure out where they are. Sure, I can look at tests and things like that, but I really want to see, like, how do you articulate this concept? How do you articulate your thoughts? How can you explain this to your peer? How can you even explain it to me? And the only way a child is going to feel comfortable to do that is if I've created that community and made them feel comfortable and feel like there's no judgment here, that
Mhm.
you can be yourself. So I absolutely believe that it's important that we do that.
So with you, I think we touched on this briefly earlier too. We're talking about your passion and how, between the passion and then reality of knowing I can't do everything. Where's the balance for you so that you don't get burned out, so that you don't just feel like, you know what, this is my last semester. I could be here another 3 years, but I'm not. This is my last semester. Basically, what keeps you getting in your car or on your computer to continue to do what you do? How do you keep yourself from burning out?
Reputation, because I always, like, when you think of my name in the education streets, I
Mhm.
want you to always, like, follow that up by, she did all that she could. She might not have necessarily been able to do every single thing, but she did all that she could. She looked out for those kids and she looked out for the teachers. That's what I want people to be able to say about me. Another thing that keeps me sane, though, is my network. So if
Okay.
it ain't my mother, my best friend, my husband, even my son asks me every day, "How was your day? Did anything happen today that that stressed you out or whatever?" Like, he provides a safe space for me to vent as well as soon as he gets in the car. So I think it's having my own, like, community of people who have experience, either having worked here or just hearing stories and things like that, allowing me to vent and get things out and help me to problem solve. When I first started teaching, I got my own math coach, and we used to meet every single Saturday for the first 3 years of my career. And that was life changing for me, because I had somewhere to shoot ideas out. I had somebody who had been teaching for 20 plus years to kind of vet my ideas and help me kind of think through them and process things. And it was just an invaluable experience for me. So having my network, and then also just taking care of myself. So getting my nails and my feet done, and massages, self-care, things like that. Like, I have to pour back into myself. And sometimes it takes a reminder for me to do that. But I am somewhat intentional and consistent with making sure that I pour into myself at the same degree at which I'm pouring into others. That is not to say that it is not difficult, that is not challenging, and that I don't have moments where I think about, this is my last semester. However, I know there is still work to be done. Now, whether I'll always be doing the work in this particular position, who knows? But I do always want to be doing work in education.
I love that. Again, I want to thank you for just taking the time to come and converse and, kind of delve into what's going on in the educational system. My thing is, I want people to know where they can access some of the good things you have going on. So if you would just take an opportunity to do your shameless plug, let people know where they can find you, what you offer, just anything that you want to share to let people know about you. And
So you can find me on Facebook and TikTok at Bud and Bear Fruit. It used to be just Bear Fruit, but I'm working on my trademarks and my copyrights and things like that. So when they do your searches and stuff, you gotta be a little specific there. So Bud and Bear Fruit, you can find me on TikTok and Facebook. I'm very much more I'm more present on TikTok because I create my videos for the parents, the teachers, and the students. So if you ever have a question about anything, feel free to jump into my DMs. Okay. I do check my DMs, especially when it pertains to math, because it truly excites me. And I love being able to answer math questions. So anytime you have a question, especially if it's K8, I can help with other areas of math too, but K8 comes more naturally to me because I don't have to do a lot of research. So Bud and Bear Fruit, look me up, drop me a DM, and let's make some things happen. There's a lot of work that has to be done in education, but I truly feel like that if we work together, that if we assemble ourselves, like we got to get in formation, as Beyonce says, so that we can get our kids to where we need them to get to.
do you have any final gems or any final points that you want to leave for other teachers, parents, students, adults, caregivers? Any final statements that you want to make?
My final gem that I would like to leave for everybody is, if you are in the vicinity of children, so if you're a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, I would like for you to impress upon them to take advantage of every single day. Because when you talk to adults, a lot of them will probably they'll share with you that I wish I could have done this, or I wish I could have done that. And it's a hard thing to hear as a child because you're in the thick of it and you're figuring yourself out and things like that. But I really want you to take advantage of every day, however you see that should look like, however you see fit. But take advantage of every day, whether that is learning something new, meeting someone new, whatever that is, whatever that means to you. Just really take advantage of every day, because you don't want there to come a time where you're like, I wish I could have done something different, and I could have been so much further along if I would have just done this one thing. So go ahead and start thinking about those things now, and start doing it now.
That's good. Well, thank you, Miss Lamb. I
Thank you.
appreciate. No, wait, Miss Boone. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Thank you for just coming and conversing and dropping gems and giving people an understanding of basically how we could better ourselves in the community. Representation matters, and I love this for us. The fact that we have someone like you that's in the education. So I
Thank you so
appreciate you.
much.
I
Thank you. I
appreciate you.
appreciate you too for reaching out to me. Anytime you want to have a conversation, I'm always down because I love to talk.
Sounds good. If you've liked what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more people who might benefit from these type of conversations. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts and questions about today's episode. Reach out on Instagram at Marisha Cares or send an email to contact@callmarisha.com. Your feedback and stories are always welcome. Last, make sure you check out show notes for inspirational bonuses.